Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is something that has been brewing in my head for a while. It feels like forever, but it's probably only been maybe 2 months. So, I was watching Netflix, and I be looking for things to watch on Netflix that I can watch on lunch break or whatnot. Little shows. Just something that I don't have to really pay too much attention to because I don't want to take away from my TV watching experience, but something I can still enjoy while I'm there, burning time, eating my food. And I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he had one of the homies on there, and he was talking about F1 Drive to Survive on Netflix, which of course I'd seen, but I'm not really interested in F1. I don't really like the circle racing and whatnot stuff. So, I avoided it. I didn't pay attention to it. But recommendation, the way he sold the show, good advertisement on it. I was like, I'm going to check it out. It's a lunch break, whatever. Show's like 45 minutes to an hour. Let me just take a look at it and see what this is all about. Hooked immediately. Bro, I am all in on this shit now. So, now I understand the fact that if you just jump into watching something like F1, or if you just jump into watching something like NASCAR or something like that, you're just seeing the cars and you're just seeing laps. Now, NASCAR is a little bit harder still, I guess, than the F1 because you're literally going in just a complete circle. But I might touch on that at the end of this video. But then, with the F1, it's circuit racing. Now, I would imagine that if I just attempted to watch F1, depending on the track they were on and whatnot, what was going on, I probably would not have been as hooked in as I was after watching F1 Drive to Survive. So, I guess what I'm saying here is watch F1 Drive to Survive. If you find interest there, then yes, it will translate over to actually watching the F1 races. And I was so stuck on the Drive to Survive shit so quick that I watched all 3 seasons in a week. Like, I watched the first season over the period of a little bit of work, a little bit at home. But by the time I got to the weekend, I was all the way in. Like, I watched all the other 2 seasons. And I watched them with my family too, which is, they're not really gearheads. My son appreciates the cars that I have now, so he's getting older and he starts to appreciate that shit more. But he's not, he's a small child still, so the attention span isn't really there. But it was a thing where we would all sit and watch it together. And, of course, it's a little bit dramatic because Netflix is watching the drama because the drama brings attention and whatnot. But the great thing about F1's setup is there's only 20 seats. There's 20 drivers, right? And the season runs pretty long because it's 20-plus races and it's every other week. So the down season isn't very long compared to what the up season is. And the great thing being about this was by the time I finished the series of F1 Drive to Survive, I was only like a week or so out from the very first race of the 2021 season. So I was able to roll right into it because after I got done going through the series, I was like, I got to get more of this. So I started going through F1 YouTube and started digging through that. And now I'm starting to eat up all that shit, starting to dig in the history and and then of course I downloaded the app and now I'm watching. So I'm sorry if I jumped a little bit off track there, but the whole thing is there's 20 drivers, right? So the great thing is, it sucks. The thing that sucks about the 20 seats is once you start getting invested in these drivers, you want everybody to be able to compete. So like, unlike a fighting organization or a big sports league, there's not an infinite amount of space for everybody to get a time. You've only got the 20 seats. So there's always the potential that one of your guys that you like could get cut. And then it's hard to try and get back in once you're out. And then you can't drop back down to a lesser league. Because apparently once you do a full season in Formula 1, you can't just go back to Formula 2, right? So there's that, right? But the great thing about the 20 seats is it's not very hard to learn everything about the drivers, like, really quickly. I think that there's only like 1 or 2 drivers that I didn't really get the feel for, and that's because F1, the Drive to Survive, didn't like it. It did spread around to where you get like a good sit down, you get behind the scenes with the drivers, the managers, the team owners, the people who operate the team, all that kind of stuff. But I think was it Lando Giovanni or what's his name? I think that he's probably the one guy that I don't really know too much about. There's a couple other new guys that came into the season that weren't there before, like Nikita Mazepin, he's well known already, even though he just started and he's a shit driver because of the fact that he's got a lot of off the track shenanigans going on in his life, and because of how he got his way into F1. And then Yuki Tsunoda, who is a driver that I believe has moved up from the Red Bull program, a junior driver from F2, that they moved into the sister team of Red Bull, AlphaTauri, who had a lot of hype behind him, but hasn't really had a season so far showing or matching the hype that was behind him until recently. And also, this recent race that happened is part of the reason why I'm deciding, like, okay, now I feel finally is a good time to talk about this. My problem is when I start getting hooked on something, and when I start to go all in, and I start to really care about something, like, if I want to talk about it, I want to be able to talk about it in a very coherent way, and really in a way to fully express the reason why I like this shit so much and why you should get into it yourself. And so, like I was saying before, like, if you're just watching the race, sometimes the racing can go long because of accidents or crashes or whatnot. So it kind of, I could see that if the race is like an hour and a half long, then you could lose your focus and attention. And it's like, oh, these cars are just going around, like, who cares? You gotta wander off, right? But that's where the whole behind the scenes watching Drive to Survive is such a compliment and helps with the entertainment value of just watching the F1 races, because once you start to learn who these drivers are and you get to like who these people are, then when you see them on the track, you root for them. Like, you want to see them do well because these are the guys you like, So watching the Drive to Survive puts the faces on these drivers, so it doesn't feel like you're just watching the same thing. It's not just like a blend of cars that you can barely tell apart, that kind of shit. It's you're seeing the car, you're seeing the name on the TV, and it's not just a mishmash of things. These people, like, or you get the feeling like these people, and you want to see where they go. So watching Drive to Survive and then watching Formula One is the perfect combination, right? So even on the races that aren't really super exciting, you still are invested in what's going on because you're invested in the drivers and you want to see what these guys do. I'm not really a sports fan. Like, I enjoyed playing sports when I was younger. I don't do sports now, but I guess, that is what these guys are feeling when they're watching sports. Like, you're invested in the athlete. So it's not just watching the game that's exciting to you. It's also watching the progression of your favorite guys, your favorite stars. And I know that you can't see the faces of these guys because they're encased in these cars and you barely see the helmet on the top. But this is the way it is once you start watching the races after you learn who these people are. And I think that's the one thing that's hard about motorsports that kind of separates them from, the regular sports, is because you can actually see the players for the most part unless you're watching like American football. So there's that, right? Now, again, why I decided to pick, why I was like, this is the right time now after watching this past weekend's race at Baku in Azerbaijan, is because this was a crazy fucking race. Now, because of the nature of my schedule, because I'm up until 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to sleep. I'm in bed when these races start. Now, usually the races, I think live around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, like stateside time. So you can actually watch the race live at a decent hour. But because I'm a night owl, it doesn't work out well for me. So now I have to avoid spoilers until I can actually sit down and watch it. And also the UFC has its fights on Saturday as well. So if I'm waking up kind of late, that means I have to watch F1 immediately if I want to have enough time to make sure that I watch the fights. Or I missed it entirely and I'm waiting until later in the week to watch it. So anyway, the whole thing is that you can generally, same thing like watching a fight, you know how long the rounds are. So if you turn on a fight and if it's shorter than that time span, then oh, this fight's going to get stopped. Like, it's not going, even if you don't know who wins, you know that the fight's not going to go the distance because the time is short. So like on the second race or the third race of the season in Portugal, like, the race was only like 30 some minutes long. And that was super short for me. I'm like, fuck, I would like at least an hour of racing. So a 30-minute race is like, wow, that was real quick. And then, but at the same time, like, I know the general distance of the race tends to be an hour, hour and a half. And then when I turned on the race for Baku the other day, it was like 2.5 hours. I'm like, holy shit, like almost 3 hours long. So I'm like, well, some crazy shit's definitely going to happen today. So start watching, right? And we're halfway into the race, no crashes, no collisions. Because the Formula, the Drive to Survive on Netflix, I'm not saying it's not really like this, but when you're watching Drive to Survive, you're like, oh my God, there's like crashes all the time. Like, it's like almost immediately there's going to be a crash. That's the way you get the feeling for the F1 races, but that doesn't tend to be what it is. Now, of course, when they launch, that's the most dangerous point, because the entire pack of 20s together, and that's when usually all kinds of fuckery can happen. So once they get past that, if there's no major accidents, then usually for the most part, like, it's not so bad. And of course, the deeper into the race you go, the more the field starts to spread apart. Then of course, again, the less chances for crashes is usually like a failure of some sort, or if anything happens, right? So halfway through the race and nothing happens, I'm like, well, what the fuck? You know, this race is really long and we're a good ways into it and nothing's gone down. And then bam, first accident. Lance Stroll loses a tire on the straightaway and smacks into the wall. And at first, everybody's thinking, well, you know, debris, because, you know, but at the same time, it didn't really make sense to me. Like, debris in that part of the track where the least likely chances for accidents or nobody having scrapes or anything fall off their car doesn't seem like a legit thing. But then again, at the same time, the way the race format was going for this race, people were, you know, of course. See, if you don't know about the pit stops in Formula One, sorry, we're going off on a side tangent here, but the pit stops are like, they're there by design. Like, the Pirelli, the company who makes the tires, provides 3 sets of tires for each team. A soft, medium, and hard compound. And these tires are specifically designed to degrade with a certain amount of laps, because this forces a strategy between the teams, and it forces you to pit stop. It makes you pit stop, so that way it can shake up the race to make it a little bit more exciting, right? So the way Azerbaijan was, the way the Baku race is, it's not high amount of laps. It's only 51 laps for this race. So the goal for most people in this, or for what seemed like every team, was a one-stop race. So instead of like a 2-stop race for a 70-something lap thing where you switch up tires twice, these guys were aiming to only pit stop one time. So at the time Lance Stroll lost his tire, he had not pitted. And so then my initial thought was not debris, that he ran the tires too late and one just gave out on him on the straightaway. You know, but at the same time too, then the commentary team is talking about that. They're saying, yeah, but those tires should be in theory good for another 10 laps. Like, it shouldn't have gave out where it had. And again, these tires are very deep, in-depth engineered, so that they're generally spot on. Now, of course, there are things you can do to extend your tire life and whatnot, depending on your speed and how aggressively you're driving. But anyway, the consensus was that the tire should not have failed. It failed too early. So there's something was involved there. And then, so, okay, well, we had one accident, but still, like, I think that one was just a yellow flag. So yellow flag on the racetrack, you're just slowing down. You're not stopping the accident. So if the safety car comes out and reduces the speed for everybody until you get the car off the track and the debris off the track. So I was like, okay, you know, I don't get it, you know. And then we start getting further into the race, and if you don't know, Lewis Hamilton is like the 7-time world champion guy for Mercedes, and Mercedes is the dominant team in F1. And there's a very tight battle between Red Bull Racing and Mercedes this year. It is back-to-back type deal. Lewis Hamilton has had a bunch of years where he's literally just coasting to a driver's championship. Max is a guy who's been working his way up, and now he's at a point where he's directly challenging, where it's like, you win a race, I win a race type deal. So very close. In Monaco, the last race in Monaco, Max won the race, and he finally got out ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship. So this is a super important race, too, to try and see where standings are going to be. So Max gets an early, you know, jump into, I think, lap 3, he takes the top spot, and he holds it, and he's pretty much coasting with a pretty big gap between him and the second guy. And the second guy, of course, being his teammate, Sergio, was also able to get up there, and has also helped trying to play defense with Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton just couldn't get the speed to get around Perez to threaten Max. So Max just had a pretty easy go of it. But then, you know, I started getting nervous. I'm like, yo, we're like 5 laps away from the end of the race now, but I'm still seeing, like, on the timeline for the video is still long. So I'm like, yo, what the fuck? And sure as shit, I look down for a second and look up, and I see fucking Max Verstappen's car just spinning and slamming into the wall. I'm like, yo, what the fuck just happened, right? And turns out, on a straightaway, Max loses a fucking tire. Now, similar setup, similar circumstances. The difference was, I think Max had already pitted and swapped tires. So, what the fuck? What the fuck, Pirelli? So now, because we have two failures in the exact same circumstance on straightaways, now we're looking at tire investigations, which of course we're only a day or so, we're a day after the race, so I don't know what the fuck has been discovered yet. I'm still waiting to find out what their thing is. Apparently, the guys are going to try and reconstruct the tire from the debris and see if they can find a kind of puncture or if they think the tire just failed. I'm thinking the tire just failed. Two fucking tires like that give away on a straightaway. It seems a little weird. And no, it wasn't the exact same straight. It was a different straight and a different spot, and where we had the tire failure. So now I'm freaking out, right? Because fucking Max just not only do you not win the race, you don't get points because you're not finishing. So the winning spot wins 25 points. Max is only ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship by 1 fucking point right now. Lewis Hamilton, now with Max being out of the race, is now bumped up to second place, which I believe is like a 15-point jump. So even if he can't get around Sergio to win the race, he's still going to rack up a large amount of points to put him over Max in the Drivers' Championship. So it wasn't just the fact that Max was out of the race I was fucking like, oh my God, on. It's just now Lewis Hamilton is back to raking in a decent stash of points over Max. So I'm like, fuck me. Like, this is one of those things where Lewis doesn't have to win to win. He doesn't have to win the race to be back in the lead for the Drivers' Championship. Or the Drivers' Championship. So I'm like, fuck, man. Fuck. Now, the difference between this stoppage and the last stoppages, when Lance lost his car in the race, it was a yellow flag that slowed the traffic down. This time, and I'm not gonna lie, I skipped through. I wasn't about to watch an hour of, downtime. And I know that there's commentary that I missed, but it's whatever. So I skipped through it to get back to the race. And so get back to the race, it's a restart when there's a red flag. When they stop the action, everybody gets off the track, everybody pits, and then you get back in your spot on the race for the restart. Now, this restart happens with 2 laps left. So it's kind of like, even like Lewis and some of the other drivers talk about that, like the reason why they stopped this was for showmanship, for, to give the fans some fun, because you're starting everybody at the start point again. And it doesn't matter if you're in the back of the pack or not. You got 2 laps left. So you go balls to the walls. You don't have to worry about fuel. You don't have to worry about tires. You don't have to worry about managing anything. You just fucking go, right? Do not crash, go. So the 2 laps left, the restart, there's a big shakeup in the field. Like, there's people jumping ahead that, finally breaking out of their spot, jumping ahead into the top 10, jumping into the points. And on turn 1, Lewis Hamilton locks up the brakes and goes off the track. Didn't crash, but there's only 2 laps left. No time to make up any space. And you see him drop all the way down out of the points. So this is the reason why I like this F1 shit so much, right? Because it's not just, yes, you have these 2 guys that are in contention for the championship, but they don't have to win every race. And there are times to see other drivers that you like get podiums, get points, all that stuff, right? So Max got taken out of the race, didn't get points, but so did Lewis Hamilton. So both of them didn't gain any points, and their standing continues exactly where it is in the Drivers' Championship with Max at a 1-point lead. So that means we don't have no big gap, no deficit to make up. So that means going into the next race, the stakes are going to still be the same as they were at Baku. Going into Baku, neither of these guys could afford a mistake. Neither of these guys could afford an L because the championship is that close in points. 1-point deficit. So now we got to see this crazy race. It was super exciting. And we get to carry that momentum into the next one because the stakes don't change for the Drivers' Championship. And the great thing was about this, about the win for here is Sergio Perez got his first win for Red Bull. And I think it might be only his second ever win in Formula One. Sergio's a good driver. Sergio usually keeps into the points, but he's not a race winner. Right, so that was cool. And then also Pierre Gasly came in P3. Reason why that's cool is because Gasly, a lot of people feel, got the shaft by Red Bull because Red Bull aggressively changes out drivers. Like Daniel Ricciardo, the driver that was driving, that was established a race winner with Red Bull, left because he felt that Red Bull was putting too much shine on Max Verstappen, and he didn't feel like he was getting the respect that he should get. This is implied from watching the series and from seeing what happened and how things played out. This is my implications is that Daniel didn't feel he was getting the respect he should from the team, that too much of the shine was going to Max, so he decided to leave the team and go somewhere else that would, better focus on him. More power to you. I feel you. I believe you. I probably would have done the same in his position. So that left another seat open, and I think that they ran Pierre Gasly in that seat for half a season. He didn't do too well, and they kicked him out of it. And then they got another guy they put in there, and he didn't do too well, and they kicked him out of it. And now they got Sergio Perez. So Gasly, the guy that got kicked out, he's a good driver. I think that he didn't do well under the pressure to deliver that Red Bull puts on you. Like, it's a lot of pressure in that seat when you're racing behind Max Verstappen. So seeing him on the podium doing well, and it's not his only podium since he's been kicked out of that seat. He's been they kicked him back to AlphaTauri, and since he went back to AlphaTauri, he's had consistently good results. So it was great to see him standing up there on the podium next to Sergio, kind of like a fuck you to the Red Bull establishment. Like, look at me, you didn't think I was good enough. I'm out here still killing it. And then also the other one that's was a big thing for a lot of fans, a lot of longtime fans, was Sebastian Vettel. Sebastian Vettel got P2, right? So Vettel had a fucking fantastic race. He had a great race at Monaco, and he had a great race this weekend at Baku. Sebastian Vettel was the past king of F1. He was a 4-time driver champion for Red Bull, and he was the guy that was he was the champion before Hamilton had his come up, right? As a matter of fact, I think since Hamilton started winning championships, there's only one guy, I believe, that stole the championship from him, which was his previous teammate, Nico Rosberg, who took the championship and then retired. So it was cool to see Seb return, because when Sebastian left, Sebastian was a 4-time champion, then he left Red Bull and went to Ferrari, and then Ferrari, when he was there, Ferrari took a shit. Like, Ferrari was just down in the dumps. They weren't really winning races. They weren't doing very well. They became like a midfield team. And so I think after 2 or 3 years at Ferrari, like, Ferrari cut, Vettel. And it was kind of like a little bit of a controversy thing too. And like, Vettel wound up taking like cheap shots at Ferrari because, like, fuck you type thing, you dumped me. So Sebastian announced himself going to the new team, whatnot, like on the day that Ferrari was racing at their home track, kind of like another spit in the face, fuck you type deal to the Ferrari establishment. Then he goes to the new team, Aston Martin, and they weren't doing very well so far this season. So I think Baku is number 6 in the race season. Monaco is number 5. I think I don't really even think that Sebastian's been really gaining points for the team, or Aston Martin in general. I think they're not a midfield team. They're on the lower end. And now, see, as far as points go in Formula One, only the first 10 finishers gain any points, and then the points aren't the same. They are staggered. Like, number 10 gets 1 point, type deal, and then this person gets 5, and this one gets, and so on, etc. So if you finish outside of P10, you're not gaining points. And it seemed to me like Aston Martin would like finish in the top half of the lower half of the teams. So to see Sebastian Vettel have the performance in Monaco was like, oh, great, maybe Seb is back. That was the conversation. Maybe he's back on point, and maybe he's back on par. He's getting his mojo back. He's getting used to his new car, and he's going to be here. But then again, Monaco is such a very restrictive track, and there's, it's not the same as a normal F1 because of how restrictive everything is. So maybe like, oh, well, maybe this is just a Monaco performance. He's like, had a good Monaco. Let's see how he does next week. Baku is similar. It's also a street circuit, but it's not as restrictive as Monaco. There are multiple places on Baku where you can pass, whereas you can't. It's not the same as Monaco. So for him, like, there was a good point. There was a good part in time where Sebastian had the lead in the race. Like, he led the race at number 1 for several laps. But it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're in the top spot right now, but it doesn't really matter because you haven't pitted yet. These guys behind you have. And eventually you're going to have to go into the pit lanes for a tire change. And usually on a lot of these races, from what I watch, if your pit is good enough, you only lose 2 spots. Like, you'll only lose 2 positions, like on a normal track. But what I've been noticing on Baku, which I think is the reason why people were focusing so hardcore on the 1 pit stop for the race, is that when you pitted at Baku, you're losing like 7 positions, 5 positions. So when, Sebastian Vettel leading the race, is like, yeah, you're leading the race, but as soon as you pit, you're down hardcore. So eventually he did pit, and he dropped down. And he dropped down to number 6 or number 7, right? But during the shakeup of the accidents that, eventually it cleared the way. And at the restart, he was able to get back up into P2. So great race. And, so I know that this is not an in-depth explanation of how Formula One drives, how Formula One works, right? There's plenty of Formula One YouTube channels out there. I just wanted to talk to you about Formula One Drive to Survive and just Formula One in general. This isn't a review of the show either. There are also people out there who review the show and can go into better detail that are more knowledgeable about this. But I just wanted to show you guys, or just explain how watching that show turned into a love for the sport, and how I think that show perfectly complements the sport. Now, same thing like if you watch the MMA, if you watch the UFC, if you're a nut, if you're a big fan of it, you realize and understand that The Ultimate Fighter, the reality fight show, saved the UFC from going under. And by saving the UFC, also in turn saved the sport of MMA. It was an obscure, not very popular genre that a lot of people weren't watching until The Ultimate Fighter came out. The Ultimate Fighter got people's attention, and the conclusion of The Ultimate Fighter, that final fight, got a lot of people watching. It gained a lot of fans. So it's very much accredited by everybody in the industry for saving MMA and saving the UFC, and in turn saving MMA. So I think that if that show that gives you an in-depth behind the looks, the scenes, that these fighters can give you that much more pump when you're watching it, because you're not just watching random dudes, you're watching people you're watching people that you feel like you're connected to and you have a reason to root for. And then Drive to Survive did that for me, for Formula One. Then it also broadened my horizons, because I'm always looking for things to get into, shit like that. Because I'm not really a sports fan. I like motorsports. The same thing happened to me years and years and years ago for Formula D. I got a D Sport magazine that had like a behind-the-scenes type deal for an entire season of Formula D. And when you feel like you know the drivers a little better, you have people to root for, you're more invested in what's going on, what you're seeing. And then also Formula D has the benefit of being on smaller tracks, so you can see the entirety of the race from the stands. Unlike where Formula One or these things where it's a big circuit, so you can't see the entire race. You have to just constantly changing positions for you to get it together, and then you have to hear the commentary to really understand exactly what's going on. But if you like motorsports at all, and now it's got me thinking about things that I wouldn't even think about before, like NASCAR. I've never really thought about watching it, but maybe it might be a thing now. So if you're a car nut and you happen to have a Netflix subscription or whatnot, or you can download it or whatever, I would suggest watching Drive to Survive. Watch that series, and if you have any enjoyment for that series, you will enjoy F1 when you watch it. And we're only 6 races in. I believe that there's 21, maybe 24 races this year. I'm not 100% sure, but it's every other week, so it has you something to look forward to, and it's something to help you pass the time. Like if you're at work, if you're at a boring job that you like to listen to podcasts or whatever, it's great to have other content to listen to go into Formula One YouTube and start listening to what's going on there. Great stuff. I'm now a super huge fan of Formula One. I'm as much invested in Formula One right now as I am with MMA, which is pretty, I'd say, I wouldn't maybe say hardcore, but I wouldn't say a casual fan. I'm definitely a step above casual, especially with MMA. Like, I really know what's going on there. Now, I may not know all of the vaunted history, and I don't get the chance to watch all of the satellite promotions and stuff, because one, for Bellator, most of those fights are extremely boring. It's a lot of newbies coming up, so I think those cards are way too long. There's only a handful of fights that I enjoy in Bellator, and so I don't really watch that too much. I just pick the fights. And then one championship, I just can't. It's hard to avoid spoilers to going back and watch it after the fact. So I haven't really got involved into it. So I just kind of track them peripherally. I don't really dive into them deep. Now with Formula One, because it's only Formula One really. I guess if you want to push yourself outside a little bit, you can start watching Formula 2 as well, and they're both on the same app and they race the same days, so you can watch Formula 2 and then watch Formula 1 right after it on the races that happen, because the Formula 2 drivers are the guys in waiting for Formula 1. So it's a good way to gauge who's going to be coming to the field as these drivers move out or get cut or whatnot. So Yeah, I really hope that I've convinced you to watch this shit. Drive to Survive is fucking awesome. It's an awesome show, and it's a fucking fantastic companion piece to F1 in general. And with the shit that's going on, and with the Formula One championship race being as tight as it is right now for the drivers' championship, I would imagine it stays the same moving on. And because of the kind of craziness that the Mercedes has been having so far with between Hamilton and Bottas, like just the differences in performance this year, it doesn't seem to be like that great. It seems like the Mercedes is kind of taking a step back. I am very much looking forward to the next season of Drive to Survive to see the things that we can't see watching the races that happen behind the scenes. So, as much as Drive to Survive, I think, is a prerequisite to watching Formula One, now that I'm involved in Formula One and I can see it go down, it's going to be great to be able to go back and watch the next season of Drive to Survive just to see the things that we missed out on and see the details we missed out on behind the scenes that you can only kind of get from the periphery as you're watching the races. All right, guys. So this is the reason why it took a long time before I made this video, because I had a feeling it was going to go on long like this. Social media links are in the description down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and peace.